Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dialogue Podcast. And this week on episode 8, we're going to be talking about big T and little t trauma. What does that mean? What is it? What are some examples? And what can you do about it? Check it out. All right, so Greg Ford.
Shaylyn Ford.
Welcome to episode 8. I feel like
Great
I always
number.
say 00, whatever number. I'm not sure. I just did that from the very beginning, like episode 1.
You're speaking
00.
optimism around that this
is going to be in the
gonna stand
triple
the
digit episode.
it's gonna stand the test of time.
I like that. You called out, I am a glass half empty kind of gal. That's what it is.
I mean,
So-
you could throw another 0 in there. Episode 0008.
Okay, we'll start with 3.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there.
All right.
Because, I mean, that gives us 999 episodes.
You gotta maintain
That's gonna give us time.
optionality.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
We might get to 999 and they're as tired of it as we are. So,
Yep. Hey, I got something to tell you before we get into the deep thoughts.
oh my, okay.
So, something I haven't told you yet. It's not that big a deal, but
That's
okay.
always a terrifying way to start out a conversation, though, especially a recorded one. So
That's how we
let's
pull
do
these
this.
listeners in.
Let's
They're
let's
like,
do
what?
this. What
is going
revelation?
to be revealed? Okay. So, one of the ways I show love to you and bond with you is by sending you nature reels.
Yes.
So normally I wouldn't really have a whole lot of personal engagement in nature reels, except for I know that you love them, and it's a big part of your life, and I just want to join you in
Okay.
your joy.
Okay.
So as you know, I sent you a lot of nature reels recently, right?
Correct.
So because of that, right, the algorithm has started to believe that about me, so they're sending me a lot of.
It's like, Greg, you seem like you love videos about whales and manta rays.
So you know what's happened is not only am I now observing a lot of nature reels, I'm starting to dream about nature.
Oh, no.
I'm starting to dream about weird dreams about alligators
Oh,
and
That's
sharks and some of these. Yeah, it's actually
uncomfortable.
it's affecting my sleep.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So all that to say, it's a small price to pay to show you love.
So,
And-
are you having, I'm assuming, scary dreams about these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, alligators in general tend to scare me, and of course that ends up in the reels because they're going to send you stuff that's provocative or that is
right. It's like
it's
coming out
not
of the
just like
water,
a
out of
gator
nowhere.
sitting there, but it's
Right.
Fighting a leopard or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm waking up in full blown night terrors or
Sweats.
I don't know that I call them total nightmares, but they're not pleasant dreams. But
I have to say, though, to be fair, I don't think this can all be brought back to me because
well, this
I
wasn't
tend
about
to
blaming
watch-
you. It was about wanting you to know that I love you.
Okay, I do. I feel
And
very
I'm
loved.
I'll gladly take on, the whatever comes with that.
I was going to say, generally, most of my nature content that I consume is pretty lightweight, sweet, beautiful, awe-inspiring, whatever. Occasionally, there's more intense stuff. You, on the other hand, are the one that brought to the table the most disturbing video that your cousin Josh and I have
my
ever seen
gosh.
in our lives, which was a Komodo dragon. Don't go look for it. Just trust me. Don't go look for it. It's a Komodo dragon eating a goat. It was a goat, right?
That will haunt your nightmares, dude. That
The goat.
That's unbelievable.
Let me look into your eyes here. We might need to zoom in on this in post-production. The goat was still bleating, not bleeding, bleating, making noises, bah, from inside the Komodo dragon.
that's the circle of life at its worst, bro. I was shook.
I am not generally shook at all. Since I was a very small child, I'm like, cool, we watched the lion take down the antelope. It doesn't bother me at all. This was deeply disturbing to watch this Komodo dragon just literally eat this thing whole
I
and
didn't
alive.
know Komodo dragons were that big, and the way they walk, they walk like Conor McGregor coming out of the octagon. Okay, it's like Conor McGregor and a dinosaur had a baby, and it just walked out of the abyss, and it's about to do some damage. And they are filthy creatures.
They are really
Filthy
horrifying.
creatures.
If people don't know anything about Komodo dragons,
do not.
Don't watch that video,
Do
but
not
do a little research.
go to YouTube. Please don't. You
there's-
can't unsee it.
They're
haunt your dreams, dude.
Their saliva is so bacteria ridden that it's toxic. Like it's not technically like venom or anything, but it
That
will
thing
like
stared
infect
into
you
my
and rot
soul.
you. Yeah, they are terrifying.
When it was walking toward that goat.
They are terrifying.
Dude, let's change the subject.
Let's move
please.
on. My stomach is turning.
It is
Woo!
bad news.
Feeling a little
Let's
hot.
talk about something pleasant.
Yeah.
Anything.
Okay. So, unfortunately, what I was gonna suggest talking about today doesn't really tee up to pleasant. I was gonna talk about big T and little T trauma.
Okay, that's pleasant compared to Komodo dragons wreaking havoc on wounded animals.
That was a little T trauma
Yeah.
experience,
Okay.
honestly.
Let's
okay,
talk about it.
before we even jump into that, I need to just apologize to everyone who has been listening to the last like 4 or 5 episodes. I swear my voice will not sound like this forever. It's so obnoxious. Like I have dealt with bronchitis for the better part of a month. I have never been sick this long in my life. It's super annoying, and I sound like the goat being eaten by the Komodo dragon, and I really hate it, and I'm sure it's not pleasant for everyone else as well. So I just want to apologize and let you know that I started, taking some medication that my doctor gave me, and hopefully now that we have actually attacked this with a prescription instead of trying to wait it out and just do natural stuff, hopefully this will be gone
Well,
soon.
on behalf of all the people listening, and as the person who hears your voice the most, I forgive you. And
because I know you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean,
It's
I don't
rough.
mind. I don't mind it.
You don't mind. I shouldn't say
It's
that.
not that
That
big a
makes
deal.
you sound mean. It's okay. We'll move on.
Yeah, let's move
It is
on.
it is an annoying
Yeah.
voice, but it's gonna get better. I promise. Please stick around for
We know
more
you didn't do
episodes.
it on
It'll get-
purpose.
I didn't. I really can swear that I didn't do it on purpose.
All right.
Okay, so when I said big T and little T trauma, probably a lot of people have never actually heard that terminology before. I hadn't heard, or maybe they have. I hadn't heard it until a couple of years ago. But the idea that there are capital T traumas, like massive events that happened in your life that were this very tide-turning, catastrophic moment, whatever. And then there are little T traumas, which are maybe things that people wouldn't look at, and it's like, yeah, it wasn't the moment you got into a devastating car accident and you're now paralyzed, or the loss of a loved one or something like that. It's something smaller, on our like societal scale, but the impact of some of those things, of a little T trauma in your life, can be very devastating and have very long-term effects. For example, a little T trauma would maybe be, this is one that has specifically happened in one of my friends' lives, and she's talked about this before. When she was a little kid, some key people in her life made some pointed comments about her body. And not even necessarily like truly horrific statements as far as just outlandish,
Teased
whatever.
her or
But oh, you'll be so cute when you
labeled her.
lose the baby fat type of things.
Yep.
And so what that solidified in her mind as a small child was, I'm not pretty now, because you said I will be cute. So I'm not pretty now, and I will only be pretty if I, quote, lose the baby fat, which means be as skinny as I can be. That's what you take from that statement. Therefore, some of these things that really were not intended by these people to be these horrible comments, and in a roundabout way, kind of meant it as a compliment, but it ended up spinning into motion, because you stack up enough of those types of things, the development of an eating disorder, and it being this really long-term thing that she's had to deal with throughout her life. So that's kind of just setting up for people the difference between like big T and little T trauma. Mm-hmm. And so what I wanted to talk about with you was just kind of if you wanted to touch on any personal experiences that you've had and some of the ways that you've like seen those things affect you in your own life or in lives close to you. And then how do we go about dealing with some of these things and moving forward and going on a healing journey?
Yeah. So, few thoughts. So first, a little disclaimer. So if somebody's happened to be listening to this, somebody shared it with them or they stumbled on it. Just to full disclosure, like I'm not a clinical psychologist.
Neither
I'm
one
not
of us are psychologists
a
or
licensed
therapists.
counselor or anything
Right.
like that, right? I'm a low-key psychology enthusiast,
There you
total
go.
amateur, complete amateur.
Yes.
So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm not fit to diagnose anyone or
Treat.
prescribe treatments or anything like that. Just an observation. Of course, over the years, have had a lot of people share a lot of things with me, right? As a pastor, and friends have shared things, and then certainly had my own things, right, that I've tried to work through. And I fight pretty hard for introspection and like digging into my thoughts and feelings and turning them over and processing them with as much courage as I can and trying to be objective about those things so that I can, loosen their grip on me or avoid some of the pitfalls and that comes along with just not really understanding what's going on inside. So just to kind of say that out loud, I like that concept because like you said, you think about an acute injury versus a chronic injury, right? Like an acute injury is
Unpack that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
yeah.
you already
So
were.
yeah, like you have a collision, and it's like, well, I know exactly why my shoulder hurts because, I ran into that thing, or like you said, I got in a car accident. A chronic thing would be like, man, it's like I'm exercising and my shoulder didn't feel quite right, and
Nagging injury.
it's nagging, it's
Yeah.
lingering, it's not going away. Maybe it's getting worse, and so you're trying to figure out how did it happen, why is it there, how do I get rid of it? So if you take that physical example and you would tie in your emotions or, your psyche, how you feel about life, your feelings. I think some of them are, like you said, it comes from something, a memory. I can remember that thing, that moment that I was forever changed. And then others, it's like, man, I have this undertone in my mind of insecurity or shame or feelings about myself or other people or whatever that might be. And it's hard to know what to do about it. Do I just power through it and is it going to get better, right? Because again, if you think physical, sometimes you got this thing and man, you just keep doing it and eventually it loosens up and goes away.
Right.
And then others, they try to power through it. Next thing you know, you end up with a much bigger problem
Right.
on your hands. So I think it's worth digging into, and done a lot of that. In terms of a specific thing, I think, I look back, and not to turn this into a big theological conversation necessarily, but, I grew up I kind of being taught that people are bad. You're just kind of born bad. And I think, the term sin nature, right, which you see in the Bible, the book of Romans, talks about our sin nature. You look, it's a little confusing when you go to the beginning of the Bible. So you go into like Genesis 1, it's like we're made in the image of God. It says both men and women are made in God's image. And then in Genesis 3, sin enters the world. And again, Romans unpacks a lot of that, talks about when, the first Adam and the second Adam, and the first Adam brought sin in the world. And it's like, so then what happened then? Is then after Adam messed up and sinned, is now all humanity wired with sin as your default position? Or when you look in the idea of sin nature, a lot of your Bibles that will say sin nature will have a little asterisk or a footnote, and if you follow that footnote, it will say at the bottom, or flesh. So in a sense, my body, my human, not just my body, but my emotions and everything that comes with my consciousness of the world and what we've talked about in church, whether we're a bundle of appetites that are craving certain things, and I'm prone in my flesh, I'm prone to being short-sighted. I'm prone to being deceived and fooled. I'm prone to wanting to satisfy, again, my feelings, my urges, whether it's I want to lash out in anger or I want to feel better, so I would want to indulge those type of things. Again, that's our sin nature that we battle. And as long as we have flesh, we will have those wrestling matches. You never just graduate that. It's ultimately seeing, the liabilities attached to being governed by or walking in the flesh versus walking in the Spirit.
Yeah.
So, the idea of managing, your flesh and your sin nature, so to speak, the more I kind of studied that and learned about that, I realized I had some low T trauma around just sort of thinking I was a bad person, and I was kind of made that way.
Inherently
bad in my core. Mm-hmm. And therefore, every bad thing I did or wanted to do was the real me. Mm-hmm. And then all the good stuff I was trying to do was really me just faking, me trying in my flesh somehow to do enough good to offset the bad. But all that good stuff, anytime I was kind to someone or, did something sacrificial or went the extra mile or forgave someone or whatever, that's just me trying to be good. Mm-hmm. But really, man, if you peeled all the layers back, got to the real me.
Almost like that's a manipulative tactic on your part when you try to do good.
Yeah, or just me trying to convince myself or other people that I'm good. Mm-hmm. It's not really, it's an act. Mm-hmm. But the real you, man, the real you is a rotten dude. Yeah. The real you is just selfish and wicked and evil and wants to do bad stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that sort of belief that I had, and I don't know anybody sat down and walked me through it that clearly, but that's kind of the message I received.
Exactly.
So I think what it did was it created a self-belief that I was probably going to screw my life up at some point. The real me was going to come through, and when people saw that, they would reject me. Mm-hmm. That God ultimately probably, I was kind of maybe not his favorite kid, that God really knew, because, God looks at the heart. Everybody else, thinks you're a nice guy because you're being nice, but God knows that you really want to cuss somebody out or you really want to, be vindictive mm-hmm. or what you really want to do. And instead of seeing it as like just a part of the human experience of wrestling through flesh and the process of maturation, I saw it as something that was true about me that was very, I think, it created a sense of shame I didn't know how to get past.
Yeah.
So that would probably be for me. I know a lot of people have worse things like neglect. That maybe they didn't tell you they didn't love you or that you weren't valuable, but that you never got, they didn't show you attention or love or whatever it might be.
I think what you just said there is super important, though, because you called out what I think is one of the biggest issues when we talk about big T and little t trauma is that we start comparing. Mine's not as bad as theirs, or mine's worse than theirs. That's not what this is, what that framework is there for, right? For comparing, because what you can end up doing is belittling an experience or overblowing an experience in a way that is not healthy for you to get past it or the person that you're talking to. So for you to say, like, I know there are other people that have had bigger things. Sure, there are other people that have had monstrously traumatic things happen to them, right? But it doesn't diminish what happened for you. And I also think you can't diminish the overarching amount of damage that a belief like that can do in your life, because it's one of those insidious little things that just kind of seeps into every pore and crack of a space, right, in your life. It's not just kind of this side belief that, like, yeah, I just always kind of thought like I was inherently bad. No, think about what believing you're inherently bad really does in every single area of your life, in the way that you'll approach things, the way that you'll feel about yourself, your core, like, that's huge. It really is a huge thing. So I also think what you touched on there was kind of similar to what I was saying about my friend, that you said no one sat me down and like explicitly said that to me. Greg, you are inherently bad. Mm-hmm. And so, these are these terrible things about you. But they didn't have to, because what was implied there grabbed into, and sunk its hook into that part in your heart where it could do a lot of damage. And I think that's kind of the ugly thing that people don't realize is sometimes, and this is not meant to make people feel bad or nervous about everything that comes out of their mouth, because, you can't control everything in the way that people take it. But I do think there is something important to realize about the effects of what we say, and the way that it can sink into someone's heart and just become this anchor and this thing that they think about over and over again, and that they end up building beliefs about their whole life on, right? Especially some of the messages that we hear when we're younger. I think we use them as foundational pieces that we start building everything else on, and all of a sudden you get to adulthood and you look back and you go, that foundational stone is totally faulty. It's not serving me. It's unstable. I can't build anything solid on top of this.
Well, if I kind of keep going on the, what I was just talking about in terms of what, I don't even know if it belongs in the category of low T trauma, but I think maybe it probably does.
I definitely think it does.
And I would think if I keep going on with it, and I think about, the church and Christianity and what we teach people, what we teach kids, and all this, and a lot of times I think what we're trying to do is create a certain outcome, and I hear people a lot of times who are troubled that, man, if we paint this really gracious picture about God, that God really just thinks you're great and he loves you and he's super forgiving, and we really hang a little too long on the story of the prodigal son and whatever, that what we're going to do is just give people permission to just
be wild,
totally do whatever they want to do, send their brains out, be irresponsible, be totally self-absorbed, and complicate their lives and live with this sort of entitled, immature view of life that, wow, you're so great. And the reality is, man, you made horrific decisions. You hurt people, and we're going to create these self-centered people. I do think that's possible. I do think some people could come to those conclusions. I think that some people are maybe even more prone to that than others to end up there. But I don't think scaring people or shaming people into thinking that they're just a rotten, selfish human being is a good way to try to get them to strive to be something else. I think we have to embrace the tension of Ephesians 2:10 that says, you are God's masterpiece,
right?
Created in Christ Jesus to do good works.
Yes, that created to do good works. What does that say about who you are at your core?
Like, man, he has loaded you with so much good stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yes, people will point to kids and go, see, these kids, look how selfish they are. These kids have flesh. They're immature, and they're trying to figure out how to do it, how to manage it. But you know what? Kids often, you see them in their purest sense, they're compassionate, they're kind, they accept each other.
Right.
They cry about stuff, or they throw a tantrum and stomp their feet, and they do whatever. That's their flesh. They're trying to figure out their flesh. They're trying to figure out how to manage their flesh.
They're not fully developed brains.
A lot of them are some of the, again, they're sweet at their core. Like, it's just getting them how to, when do they act their worst? When their flesh is tired. When they're tired, they get really bad. I mean, every parent makes a joke. My kid's sweet, 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 until it hits this time and they fall off a steep cliff. Well, that's their flesh.
Yeah, they're exhausted.
When they're hungry, they whatever, right? When they haven't managed their flesh well, they've had too much sugar. Okay. So my point is, I think you got to understand, like, God has created you in his image to do good works. You do have flesh in the way. You have to learn how to manage your appetites and make decisions accordingly. But you've got to sit in that tension, because the reality is you and I could make decisions that would create, sinful decisions that would create so much damage and so much pain and death, on emotional death, physical death, death of dreams, death of relationships. Like, there's so much of that could fall out from our decisions. And in so doing, there would be a certain amount of guilt I would need to own and sit with. But I think trying to creating this undertone of shame that you're disgusting, or you're bad, or your default is eventually, it's all, you're gonna implode. You're gonna mess it up eventually. Like, I think that belief creates this really toxic shame that's really hard to work your way out of. It's really hard to get out of, especially if it's kind of instilled in you early.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, by the way, what you said at the beginning, you're like, I'm not sure if this is a little T trauma. 100% it is. 100%. It's a perfect example of that. And I don't think there's, any need to downplay that. But the second thing is, I think what you pulled out of that when you were saying, like, they're worried they're lingering on the prodigal son too long, and so everybody's going to get the message, just go sin your brains out and make all these terrible, harmful decisions and whatever. That's hearkening back to, we believe you're inherently bad. Mm-hmm. Because if we believe that you are inherently created in the image of God, which is everything good, it is love, it is pure, but then you just have these, things in your flesh that you're contending with and you're working on maturing. If you believe that at the core of you, it's good and it's in the image of God, then you're not naturally going to be compelled to just go do the worst of the worst things you can come up with. Like, we're all dumb and we all make dumb mistakes sometimes, But again, coming out of, place of your flesh, you're in a weak place, you're in an emotional space, you're whatever. We've all been in places in our lives where we feel weak and tired, and we've made decisions we're less proud of because we weren't in a great headspace, whatever. But I think that 99 times out of 100, people, when given freedom to operate out of a place of feeling fully loved, known, accepted, cared about,
secure,
supported, secure, safe.
Not provoked by fear.
They are not going to just go out and be feral. Like, that's not how we operate, And when our kids feel safe, secure, loved, supported, what do? They come to us with things. They try to get good advice. Ella will come to us and get our opinion on things because she trusts us and she knows that she can tell us things and we're not going to abandon her. So that doesn't lead her to go be the wildest she can be. It leads her to want to come and engage with us to get good advice on how to live her life the best way possible. When our boys, obviously they're in a little bit different category because of their autism and how that affects them. But when they feel safe and loved, it's when they're kind to each other and they're laughing and they're mimicking those same behaviors. They're being patient with one another. They're encouraging each other and calling each other to accountability, being a little Jiminy Cricket to each other. Oh, you shouldn't say that word. Maybe you should go sit and calm down for 5 minutes, right? Like, they're bringing those things to the table themselves because that's what they're experiencing. And so I think it's the same thing for us as adults in our lives. If you feel like there is this God in the universe that really loves me for who I am, he knows who I am at my deepest core. He really can see my heart. And he knows me and loves me, not in spite of it, but because of who he created me to be. I can come to him with anything and it's safe. There's nothing he can't handle that comes from me. Then I am going to feel safe to approach him for support. I am going to be operating out of a place of love in my life where I'm making decisions as a healthy, whole person, not as someone who's just trying to be scared into not being bad. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important thing. When you start saying all of that out loud, you realize how traumatic, and I don't say that lightly, but in that little T way, that it is the nagging, chronic thing, like you said earlier, that just kind of invades every little piece of our lives and can be an ongoing thing that hinders you, not to the point that you can't function as a human being, but that really colors everything that you do.
Yeah. Romans 5 talks about, it says, before sin was ever defined, so before it was ever given into law,
Ten Commandments.
Defined specifically, right, with the Torah or the Ten Commandments, right, all of that. Before it was defined, it was like people were still doing this stuff. So before a lie was
called a lie,
was put in the dictionary, right, people were lying. They were
Right.
telling things that weren't true. And
Yeah.
again, all of those things before they were defined were still wreaking havoc. So the idea that, really trying to live righteously, trying to eliminate sin from my life, understanding that to live that way is a better way. Mm-hmm. It creates safer relationships. If I don't, then it creates a more unsafe environment for me and the people around me. And that's what motivates me to go, I really want to deal with this stuff. Not that if I believe that my core God has made me in his image and he loves me and he understands me, I'm going to be way more likely to come to him with my problems, come to him with my sin, come to him as my solution, as my savior, than I am if I believe what he believes about me is ultimately that if we strip everything down, I'm gross.
Yeah.
I'm bad, right? It's interesting. So you and I started watching this documentary about, it was like a prison experiment where they're basically taking these guys, they're like, look, we believe the best about you. And so we're basically going to just unlock the doors inside of the prison. I think it's called
Unlocked.
Unlocked.
It's called Unlocked,
on
yeah.
Netflix. So we started watching it to, see how it plays out. And it was really interesting kind of case study to kind of look at because in a sense, what are they doing? They're giving them more freedom than they'd been having. They had been like on 23-hour lockdown and 1 hour out, right? So imagine that, 24 hours.
Yeah.
23 of them you're locked out. One you have some kind of freedom, right?
Yeah, and you had 15 minutes for each meal. Come out, eat your food, clean your plate, back in your cell, 15 minutes.
And now they're saying, they gave them this pretty big pep talk about, hey, if this goes bad, we'll shut it down ASAP. But we believe better about you than others have, so we're going to give you this shot. What we're going to do is we're going to open up the doors. We're just unlocking all the doors inside, right?
Yeah, that 24 hours a day, which is what was wild to me because I thought surely they would at least lock their cell doors at night. Nope. Their cell doors are unlocked 24 hours a day. It all opens into a common area in the middle, so and then like a basketball court. So they're not open to just free
Yeah, they
roam
can't go outside.
wherever.
They
but
can't go into the community.
Yeah, but they can go. The basketball court area is outdoors,
Everything's open.
like within walls, and then the inner court areas they can. They were setting chairs outside their front doors like it was their front porch, and it was like an apartment complex instead of a prison block. It was really fascinating.
Yeah. So the first positive, the first advantage is, dude, we're more free than we've been. Mm-hmm. Like we have now 24 hours of freedom, which right away you would think, well, that's exciting. Mm-hmm. But the entire experiment, the entire community is built on, if we have all this freedom, that means we can all come and go as we please. Can I trust you?
Right.
And one of the guys literally said, I'm afraid to go to sleep because someone might come stab me.
He said, I'm sleeping with two eyes open.
I'm sleeping with two eyes open. So now you've been given freedom, but your freedom only works if we don't abuse one another, lie to one another,
Right.
attack one another, right? If we don't sin against each other.
Yeah, if we work together.
If we do sin against each other, this freedom is actually terrifying. Mm-hmm. So what you're seeing are people who, have been convicted of some kind of crime or
They
sin.
had everything in
was,
there from like burglary to assault. There are a couple guys in there for capital murder. Like it was a wide range of things.
So I have in my history sin.
I have abused that freedom.
We'll
That's
call
why
it that,
I'm here.
right?
Right.
And now I have to decide, do I think based on my track record and my lifestyle that that's the way I want to live? Or now I'm being given an opportunity to live by, we'll call it the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The 10 Commandments, thou shalt not this, this, and this. Do I want to live by this law? Well, why would I do it? I want to do it because it's a better way to live. Right. I want to sleep at night, and I want you to be able to sleep at night because I'm not going to sin against you. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, what I have to wrestle to the ground is, what do I believe about myself? And can I trust these people across from me, right? all that to get back to the point of, if what I believe about myself is what's true about me is I am the sum total of my mistakes, or the worst thing I ever did is the truest thing about me.
Yes.
And that's my ultimate default, versus believing, no, I'm made in the image of God. I've learned from my mistakes. That was what that did, that mistake I made, it created a life I don't want anything to do with. Mm-hmm. And now you have this collection of men in this prison that, we're kind of watching them. Of course, nobody's preaching this sermon to them. I kind of like to be their chaplain because I think, again, what we know is there's good in these guys. There's good in them.
Yeah.
And for a variety of reasons, some of which would make total sense if we could just see it all really clearly, why they did what they did along the way. Maybe it was out of fear. Maybe it was to try to protect themselves. Maybe it was, complicated. But now here you are deciding, do I want to live in sin, or do I want to continue in the path that I've been in and just turn this new freedom I have into the same old thing? And I think if you could somehow come to that core belief, you know what? If they could all independently have a moment where God showed them what is true about them. You are made in my image. You are my masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do the good work I've created for you to do. And to rethink that, to have their mind renewed around that truth, it would help them deal with what they've done in their past and even rewire what they believe is possible about their future, about who they are and who each other are. And of course, again, if everyone independently makes a decision to live in that truth, that community is about to be beautiful.
Yes.
Again, we haven't watched that far to see what happens, and ultimately, but
no,
again,
but that is a fundamental truth,
and
right?
it's an example. It's a case study. But I think, again, a lot of us aren't in lockdown necessarily, right? But yet within our lives, to go, what do I believe about me? What do I believe God believes about me? Those are really critical things that would cause me to either turn to Him, go to Him with security and trust, or to live in this perpetual state of, it's only a matter of time before the real me comes out.
Yeah. I not to be too cute with it, but I think the reality is that a lot of people are in kind of an emotional lockdown situation, right? Where they feel they cannot ever be vulnerable with people. They can't have deep relationship with other people because it's not safe. It's as much as I wish that I could be out here having some freedom, it's safer for me to stay in here inside this cell, so to speak, closed off. And so I'm going to stay in here and protect myself because I don't know what kind of damage you're going to do to my heart.
So guess what? Every time you have a new opportunity, right? Even, again, these guys in prison, they're giving them a new opportunity to operate in freedom. And if I don't change my mindset around this, I will turn this new opportunity right into the exact same, just a new version of what I did out there.
That's exactly right.
So you keep taking new opportunities for freedom or new opportunities for change, and it just becomes another iteration of the old thing.
Yeah.
It's just one, again, that's where it gets down to having your mind renewed around the truth. But I mean, again, how many people, I'm watching these guys and I'm just rooting for them. I'm going, come on, guys, like there's more in you. There's better in you. Like you got to change how you think, because this is a beautiful opportunity. This really could change your whole life.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were locked up. And yes, it's inside the walls of this prison, and you have a certain sentence that probably isn't going to change. But in here, you're given an opportunity for freedom. Don't blow it because of the same mindset that got you to where you are. Now a new thing's been opened to you.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's ultimately, as we go through life, sometimes our previous decisions have cost us something. It's brought some kind of death. It's brought some kind of something into our lives. But yet God opens up new opportunities for redemption, even opportunities for new beginnings or new things. And if I can't kind of work my way all the way down into a different way of thinking, I'll just turn this opportunity into a new version of that. And that's where you see, again, a lot of cycles, and patterns that people develop throughout their lives.
That's it. I mean, you touched on it, and I loved the way you said this when you were saying that people think that they get it in their head, the worst thing I've ever done is the truest thing about me. I think the other one I see sometimes is the worst thing that ever happened to me is maybe not the truest thing about me, but like it is what my whole life
It
boils
defines
down.
you.
Yes, it defines me, and it defines my whole existence, and everything in my life is going to be kind of like an iteration of that. And so those things can become those self-fulfilling prophecies. I think for a lot of those guys, obviously, I don't know a single one of them personally. So with that disclaimer, I think it would be fair to say if you went through that prison block and talked to each of those men about the situation that they grew up in or things that happened to them, I think that a lot of them would have big and little t trauma things that they would say. Well, and a couple of them did talk about it in some of the episodes that, like, you know, I was always really small. Like, I was smaller than my peers, and so I felt like I needed to stand up for myself. And that ended up leading to violent encounters, which became this ongoing thing in his life, right, where he felt like violence was his only answer to protect himself and to get where he wanted to go in life. But you would hear so many stories of things that people have gone through that have led them to believe things about themselves, that this is the trajectory my life will take. People from my town, you know, this is all we ever get. This is what we amount to. People buy all kinds of lies. This is the kind of people my family are, right? Like, this is our last name. This is what we're like. Or, you know, I came from a line of this, or I went to this school. I didn't have these opportunities, or this thing happened to me, and so, you know, I'm forever stained by this thing that happened to me. People will have these horrible traumatic things happen in their life, or even some of the smaller T things, and it will make them buy into that identity lie that they will then carry with themselves for the rest of their lives. And it will lead you, sorry I'm rambling, but it will lead you into this self-fulfilling prophecy where it will land you into the worst parts of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so, kind of circling back to what I was asking you at the beginning, when we talk about things like this, like how do we get on our healing journey, Greg and I don't have specific things to tell you, like do this and this and this, and then you'll be fine. You may need to actually see a therapist for certain things, depending on how intense this situation was for you and how all-encompassing. Or find a trusted friend, or go through a great program within a church or something like that. But you need to start bringing this stuff out into the daylight and examining it and looking at it and going, is this really true? Is this something, am I making this an identity thing? If it's a belief like that I'm less than, that I don't deserve this, that I am inherently bad, whatever, start unpacking some of those things at the deepest level and do that work, because that is where you actually start finding freedom, to where the trauma doesn't own you for the rest of your life, but you can take control of the narrative and start moving forward.
That's good. That's good.
Is there,
I could definitely talk about it all day. I don't know.
You
that
definitely don't have to. I just wanted to make
thought.
sure I didn't, leave us at a spot where you had something to say. And
I agree with you. I think being vigilant about not ignoring the chronic pain or the thing that's there. You know, I don't want to just complain about it. I don't want to just shake my shoulders like, I don't know what's wrong. Like, you need to go, you need to keep working on it and stay at it. And, you know, until you kind of figure it out and not just learn to cope with it or live with it. But I think at some point to go, I really do want to be free from it. So I think counselor, maybe the first one doesn't help you. The second one, you couldn't get it, but I think a lot of it, even if it's professional counseling, it really does get down to your willingness to sort of go in there and turn the lights on.
They can only dig so much.
Yeah.
You said something recently talking about counseling and therapy that I thought was really, really good. You said they can open the door for you, turn the lights on in a room and go, do you want to look around in here? They can't make you go in the room. You can
Absolutely
go,
not.
I don't really want to talk about that room. Let's talk about this room. Okay. They can.
What do you want to talk about in this room?
What do you want to talk about in this
But-
room? You have to be willing to walk into the darkest room. And they will walk in there with a flashlight with you, metaphorically, and they will open the door, turn on the lights, whatever. They'll walk with you through the room. They'll be present with you. They'll help you unpack what's in there. But they can't choose it for you, and they can't make you walk through the door. You are the only one that knows if you're cheating yourself out of the deepest work that you can get in conversations like that with someone.
Counselors aren't magicians.
No.
What they're doing is they're guides. But if you're not willing to go in there and look around and start going, what does that mean? Like, they can help interpret some of those
Right.
things. Well, yeah, this is kind of what that is, and this is where it comes from, and blah, blah, blah. But if it's kind of like they open a door and you don't walk in, counselors aren't going to drag you in that room.
No.
They'll if you want to sit out here, yeah, I'll send you a bill to sit and talk about the room we're in now, but you've already, you done talked this room to death.
Right.
You've talked about everything there. The answer isn't in here.
Yeah.
The answer is over there in that
We
thing,
need
right?
to go across the hall.
And so I think, again, to be vigilant, to go, I want to figure that out, because for me, we've done a lot of that work in our own lives. It's always connected to more things than you think it is. Mm-hmm. It really is. Like, a lot of times you think it's just your shoulder, but you find out, man, wow, that's connected to this side of my body too, and
Right.
my leg, and it's all.
My shoulder hurts because this part of my lower back's out of
Yeah,
whack.
I mean, it really is deeply connected. So that's why those are my thoughts on it.
No, I think that's excellent. You and I tend to be like thinking pictures, metaphors, that type of thing. So I think, metaphorically speaking, it may be that you need full-scale surgery on that shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's bothering you, or maybe you just need to do some physical therapy, and they go, hey, here's some exercises you can do at home to keep that loose, so that it doesn't lock up on you. But you have to be honest about how much work really needs done on it, and get the professional help.
Last illustration on
Last
this,
metaphor.
and then we can keep talking if you want about it. Or
No,
we can talk about
I think
something
this
else.
is good.
So, one of the great Hall of Fame linebackers in NFL history, a guy named Jack Lambert.
Okay.
If you Google this dude, I mean, he looks like a linebacker. I mean, he was like, I want to say the 70s. He was part of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That name just sounds like a linebacker.
Absolutely.
Jack Lambert.
Like, he just got the look. Like, he had a handlebar mustache. He
Even
was
better.
He was nasty. Like, I mean, just physical. He's part of the Steel Curtain.
Okay.
Is what was the nickname of this defense and whatever. Hall of Fame career. You know what ended his career? Turf toe.
Really?
Turf toe. So, I mean, how many times do you think the man's
By the
toe?
way, break down what turf toe is.
I mean, it's an injury to your toe, basically, right? I mean, I think it's a ligament.
Yeah.
One of the ligaments in your toe that's, I don't know if it's arthritis. I don't know exactly what it is, but I just know essentially you have this big, powerful, incredible athlete, human being who spent his whole life training for something, and probably the fact that he didn't take care of his toe
Wow.
forced him to retire.
Yeah.
So my point is, always something's going to force you to retire eventually, but it's kind of, I think, a powerful story of like, how many times is that guy's toe hurting, and he's like, I'm good.
It's just
my
my toe.
I'm Jack Lambert, dog on it. I'm a part of the Steel Curtain. I'm a big physical, 250-pound man. Like, just a toe, just power through it, and his toe ended up ending his career. So I wonder how many things, right, that are sort of chronic, that we would just say, well, it's just a toe, I can play through it, I'm tough enough. Mm-hmm. And yet it ends up being the thing that costs you more than you think it will.
That's
because
so true.
you just try to power through it, and you don't pay attention to it, and you don't deal with it. And so then it ends up bringing things to an end, maybe before they need to.
There's nothing to add to that.
Jack Lambert, dude.
Thanks, Jack.
Crestwood, Ohio. That's where he's from.
Really? I know
Yeah.
where Crestwood is. No, I'm thinking of Crestline. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't know where Crestwood is. Sorry, Jack. But thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Great talk. I'll see you next week.
We're done? It's
We're
over?
done.
Finished.
Bye.
All right. See you guys. Love you. I love your bangs, by the way.
Thanks. I would say I love yours, but I love your forehead.